On this episode of The Bad Boys, we're talking about a very serious subject, institutional child abuse, that has become an all too common story. If this has been your story, then please seek help. Reach out to thevoiceofasurvivor.com and speak with someone. One phone call is all it takes. If you want the hard-hitting journalism of Four Corners, the reliable current affairs of, well, a current affair, and the planning that goes into classy shows like The Project, then you've tuned into the wrong podcast. It's comedy, entertainment, celebrity interviews, and news stories that makes Fox News sound like an episode of The Muppets. Or maybe it's the other way around. Conversations no one wants to have, but everyone wants to hear. This is the Bad Boys Podcast. Welcome to the Bad Boys Podcast, and we were supposed to be doing an interview with Jesus Jones today, but there's been I guess you've got to do this, but they've decided to go on tour in Canada. And so we're reorganising the interview. Isn't that sad? Hey,
I can't believe they've chosen to fulfil the fantasies of hundreds of thousands of people throughout Canada rather than fulfil my fantasy.
To talk with us. I know, right?
Right.
I mean, I thought that, you were all the fantasy that they needed, Andrew.
Well, I'm all the fantasy that most people need.
Right, okay. Now, today on the show instead, we reached out to a gentleman by the name of Russell Manser. Now, interesting guy. He's just released a book that has been sort of ghost written by John Killick, and John Killick has been a fairly notorious figure in prisons and crime. And obviously reformed now, and writing autobiographies for people who have been through prison, which is
right.
A great way to completely turn his life around. And the story that you're going to hear today, I reached out and I spoke to Russell and recorded an interview with him just to really highlight this whole issue that has been occurring with institutional child abuse, because he was actually an abuse victim himself.
Yeah.
In prison at the age of 17.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a pretty tough pill to swallow when you're 17 in a prison thinking this is going to be the rest of my life.
Yeah, look, it's an interesting thing. I think a lot of people want to push it out of their minds and categorise it all as some type of bad spanking for naughty children.
Yeah.
But that's not what we're talking about here, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking about extraordinary levels of abuse.
Yeah, terrible abuse. Not just, like you said, not just physical abuse, but sexual abuse as well, and mental abuse too. That actually started him on a pathway to crime,
right?
Drugs and bank robberies, and it's an extraordinary story that he's going to talk about today. And one thing that we do talk about in the interview is the Royal Commission, and so I wanted to just sort of touch base on this because it is a very important thing that has actually happened in Australia, and I think it's a bit of a landmark case that has happened that was put together by the one and only Julia Gillard, who, in my opinion, is possibly one of the best prime ministers that we have had, that has...
Yeah, certainly in the last decade or so, I would agree with that.
Hasn't really been a lot of other good ones that have come up. So she instigated this Royal Commission, and during the whole course of the Royal Commission, which went right around Australia, 42,000 calls were handled, 25,000 letters and emails were received. They had 8,000 private sessions with, people who had been abused. And out of those sessions, 2,575 were referred to the authorities.
Well,
so
thank God.
that in itself, is pretty massive, because that's 2,500 people that are finally being listened to.
And some other people, look, just because a case wasn't referred to the authorities for formal follow-up doesn't necessarily mean it didn't have value. It's entirely possible that the victim just wanted to get it off their chest and tell someone with no desire or expectation for it to proceed to charges or legal prosecution or anything like that. It's just even the act of telling someone, getting it off your chest, telling someone authority and being listened to in itself can be an extraordinary healing process.
Yeah, and in actual fact, one of the things that Russell talks about is exactly that those 2 hours that he had when he was talking to the authorities were 2 hours away from the guards that were abusing him.
Yeah.
You think about that. You think about the implications behind that. Now, this didn't just happen. This obviously started because of the Catholic Church. So it started as a direct response to the whole George Pell case that came out. And that was when Julia Gillard said, hang on a second, there's something seriously wrong here with the schools, with the prisons, with child detention centres.
Churches.
There's got to be something done about this.
Yep.
So that's basically, how he started this whole program, which is called The Voice of a Survivor. And he was sitting in prison thinking, what am I going to do with myself and how can I help these people? And when he came out, he started this program called The Voice of a Survivor, which now has, staff and people there to talk with. If you have been through this yourself, if you're listening to this and, you are a survivor in any way, shape or form, then reach out, click the link that's on the description and reach out to Voice of a Survivor, because that's what they're here for.
Yeah.
So we are going to have a chat with him very shortly, but first let's have a quick little break. You're listening to the Bad Boys Podcast. This is the Bad Boys Podcast. Welcome back to the Bad Boys Podcast. Russell Manser was a convicted bank robber, heroin addict and survivor of institutionalised sex abuse. 23 years in prison and a string of abuses put Russell onto a trajectory of addiction, crime and over 30 years of hiding the secret that he had been hiding. The inspiration behind the movement, The Voice of the Survivor, that has helped hundreds more like him break the cycle of abuse, Russell has released a book with the help of another notorious ex-con, John Killick, to shed some light on the subject of abuse. Russell Manser, welcome to the Bad Boys Podcast.
Hey, thanks very much, Shane. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
You are an absolute inspiration, my friend. Just sort of going through what you're doing to help those who are going through abuse. And now you've released your book, you've launched your book. Pretty massive achievement, I've got to say.
Yeah, look, I'll be quite honest with you. It was done initially reluctantly, but then I realised the importance of I just really realised the importance of my story, and because I was going, like, the more and more I was telling my story, the more and more people were reaching, and I just thought, that's just another thing we've got to do. We've got to, we write the book and hopefully we can get to more people. That's my sole purpose, driving, just to get to as many survivors as we can and be part of the healing process.
So you've got a couple of, pages, one on Facebook where you've got over 17,000 followers on there now, and you're finding that you're getting a lot of people through that are all sort of putting their hand up and saying, yeah, we need to talk. I mean, this is a major problem in Australia, right?
Yeah, we've got the Australian Advocates for Prisoners and their families, and we got a lot of people reach out to us through that, and a lot of people reach out to us that have been affected by the criminal justice system. With lack thereof support getting out, and they've got no housing, clothing, or transport or anything like that. So, we've got a holistic approach, and that's normally, the sad part about abuse survivors. One of the key indicators is they end up in custody. So started that. The prisoners page with the sole purpose of sort of being using it as another arm to sort of reach out to survivors, and it's just look. I'll tell you something. It's the most rewarding thing I've ever done. It's just so rewarding to be able to be of assistance to others. And I just love it.
I mean, look, if you can't have gone through what you went through, right, 23 years inside, if you can't have gone through that and use that as I guess, a way to help others, then really what was the purpose of it?
Yeah, I mean, we're doing a lot of work now. I'm doing a bit of work. I'm going back into the prisons in New South Wales, and particularly, and doing mentoring, and we're getting invited to go back and be involved in staff training. They're sort of looking at, I've got the winning formula, and I'll apply it to other prisoners. So, look, it did serve a purpose, but I'll tell you what, I think would have been an easier route would have been a university degree or something like that, but didn't pan out that way. It just took a long way. But it is what it is. I'm very accepting of it, and I actually, there's a lot of people embracing my past and using my story to deter other kids from going down that track. So a real big rewarding too.
There's a lot of there is a train of thought out there, and we've spoken to a lot of people in the justice system, like Debbie Kilroy, who are really sort of adamant against having corrections for youth. Do you feel that there is another way?
Oh, without a doubt, I think what I mean. You show me a kid. I look at a lot of those kids, and I dare say 95% of them have been exposed to some sort of trauma, whether it be sexual, physical, emotional, or it's a sort of trauma. And I think my theory on it all is let's deal with the trauma. Kids aren't born bad. Kids aren't born bad. Let's work out. Let's scratch the surface. Let's try to work out what made them to go those decisions and try to correct that. I mean, locking kids up and treating them like animals and that sort of thing doesn't serve no purpose at all. All that does is they grow into disturbed adults. I know that through experience, and there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way.
Let's can we dive into your story? I'd love to sort of find out a little bit more about how you ended up in there and what actually happened. And I mean, obviously, this forms the basis of the new book that's out, correct?
Sure, yeah. I grew up in a place called Mount Druitt, so western suburbs of Sydney. It's a low socio-economic area, just battlers and it's just it's a melting pot of a lot of people, a lot of Indigenous, a lot of criminals, just a lot of people that society has forgotten about, and I grew up out there, and I never said there wasn't too many great role models that were setting the world on fire with happiness, and except then role models I sort of seen were the blokes that were doing crime and coming back from jail. Like you come back from jail in Mount Druitt, it's like your return war hero,
Yeah,
celebrated you, and so that sort of appealed to me. Come home big, fit, and sort of stuff. And I was always a kid that was car mad. And I stole a car once. And back in them days, there was no diversion programs or anything like that. It was that was it. You got pinched straight to lockup. And I went out to the notorious Darrick Boys Home, which is the subject of the 60 Minutes story. It was sort of a house of horror type place where sexual abuse was rampant there, and I didn't escape that. I was sexually abused whilst I was there as a 14, 15-year-old kid. I went there, like, I wouldn't say a well-balanced kid or anything like that, but I went there, what would be deemed a reasonably normal sort of a kid, and I come back a pretty troubled young man, and that's when sort of substances started to appeal to me. Like, I started smoking a lot of pot, and then went on to speed, and then by the time I was 16, I picked up a few trades when I was at a Derek Boys home, and I learned how to steal Porsches. And when I was 16, I stole a Porsche from an affluent area in Sydney. Got chased in a Porsche. I got pinched and went before a children's court, and the children's court magistrate wanted to give me a deterrent sentence that was a term of imprisonment to be served in an adult prison.
Yeah.
And so I got 12 months, and the judge stipulated to be served in an adult prison. I went to Long Bay Prison at 16 years old. I was housed with some of the worst degenerate sexual abusers in the state at the time. And, and the first night there I was sexually abused by 2 convicted sex offenders. And, within weeks I was introduced to heroin, and I just went on a spiral from there. That's where it just went, and I wasn't, and I was just a kid that came out of that prison, very dark, with a real serious void in me that could only be filled by the use of copious amounts of drugs,
So was there a turning point where you'd gone through all of this, and then, you ended up robbing a bank?
Yeah. No, look, what it was is I went back to I'd done that time when I was sort of 16. I got out when I was about 8, like about the time I turned 18 years old. I went back to prison, this time in a mainstream prison. And then, I was fascinated by bank robbers. I learned the trade in prison. And then when I was 21, I started robbing banks, and and I loved it. I just loved the fact that I could buy copious amounts of heroin. I could write myself off and maintain a reason. I've always been a kid that sort of likes good things. I like nice cars and furniture and clothes and that sort of thing. And I can maintain the both and have that lifestyle that I always wanted to, and be wiping myself out with drugs, and money was an issue. I ended up getting pinched for a series of bank robberies, which led to me. I went to court and I escaped from custody at Campsie. I got pinched 6 weeks later up in the Northern Territory. I'd done about 3 years up there.
Yeah,
I was really exposed to some serious brutality in the Northern Territory, in particular the Berrima prison at Darwin. I was bashed on a regular basis by riot squad officers who thought it was their job to teach me a lesson, and I was bashed on it. But in saying that, I got to a point within that, because I was a willing participant. When they were bashing me, I was a willing participant. I was firing back, and then one day I just said, I've had enough. I've just had enough, and then I just wasn't going to participate in it, and I was just going to let them bash me and do whatever they want, and there was no fun in it for them. And then, I went through a period of time where I was from 1990 to about 2002. I remained clean, substance-free, and, I'd got out after doing 8 years, and I met a girl, and we had a couple of kids and bought a house in the Gold Coast, but everything was fine and dandy. But the underlying issue of the abuse was still there. It was always untreated, and it was, I guess it was a bit of a time bomb waiting to go off at all times. And until it was treated, it was always going to be a trouble, and there was trouble there. I was struggling in a relationship. I was struggling to stay focused, even though I really pushed. I had a successful business and that sort of thing, and then I relapsed by drinking, and that led to drugs, and then for about 10 years after that, I was back in and out of jail for a while, and in 2013. 2013, I was on a plane on the way to Perth. I met a guy from the Royal Commission. I was reading a book called Sleepers, and he inquired why I was reading it. I said, it's the story of my life. And then he just told me about the Royal Commission, and then how it was going to go about. And, I come back from the Western Australia. I was up to no good when I was on my way over there. Come back, and then I relapsed, and I went on a series of bank robberies. I've done a few in Sydney, and I ended up getting arrested in Queensland, and came out of a bank, and I was jumped by a bunch of super citizens and done a citizen's arrest.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, and I wasn't even armed, man. I was robbing them banks. I wasn't even armed. I didn't have nothing. I was just going in there bluffing out of like a face mask tied around me, a hat on. And man, I was that cooked, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I was arrested anyway. And then I went out to. It was a real strange period in my life because I went to the prison with every intentions of committing suicide. I got to the prison that night, and then. The coaxial cable that I would have hung myself with had been wrecked by someone else who'd been previously in that cell and cut down. It wouldn't wrap around my toe, let around my neck, so I had to put it off. A guy who I suspected was a sex offender made an offer the next day to give me some drugs. I knocked that back, and then just things started. And that itself, just knocking back something from a person like that, just set a little spark in me, you know. Like I went, well, morally, I'm not that bad. I wouldn't take something off someone who I should believe is a sex offender. I went out the that day, young bloke's out there. He's got all his books set up doing a psych degree. And he said to me, I said, what are you studying? He goes, I'm studying the best psych. He said, I took that advice off you all those years ago. And he said, maybe you should. He looked me up and down with disdain and said, maybe you should take a bit of your own advice. And I went, oh, that hit home, you know. A bloke who was a mate of mine, who was a lawyer, turned up and said, mate, I think I can get you a pretty good result. I went to the education block. So in a period of 24 hours, instead of going for wanting to kill myself, I went, and it's a real good lesson to people who are going through them suicidal ideology, you know. It's, if you can put it off for 24 hours, things might change. And this is just a real classic example of it. So within 24 hours, I knocked back a shot from a bloke who I suspected that. So morally, I was starting to feel all right. I went, a little spark kicked off there. I'd given a guy a bit of advice that changed his life in regards to education. My mate turned up and reckons I can get you a pretty good result at court. And I went into the education block, and there was a little bit of hope about to do some study. So I went back, and the thought of committing suicide had dissipated, and I just made a decision. I said, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right, you know. And that included talking to the Royal Commission and talking about my story and getting some serious help. And that's when the journey really began. And seeing the Royal Commission were going after George Pell, I thought, well, if they're going after him, they must be fair income. And so I letter, and they come out and see me, and and that's when the real healing began, when I started getting proper trauma counselling, on a regular basis. Getting trauma, I got trauma counselling for them for 5 years, and it's amazing. It's amazing what can happen when people are treated with the right treatment, instead of this, we'll jump on your head and we'll bash it out of you, and we'll bash you and give you a sentence that'll most probably demoralise you and it'll scare you from future offending. That all those deterrent sentences, that never worked. Never worked.
I'm about to head into a meeting in a couple of hours' time after this call with a guy by the name of Aman Vastad, who is known as the Norwegian gun runner, and he's the same. He reached a point where through a series of things where he just went, hang on a second, there's got to be another way. And all of this, putting prisoners, putting people into prison, and not really giving them any hope is not the answer. There's got to be another solution to it all.
And there's so many, they use it, they get a lot of their ideas from academics. And I think, there's people like myself, yourself. There's, I'm putting a team together at the moment, because the New South Wales prison system right now is going for a bit of a change, where they're looking at, they've got a new commissioner, they're looking at different ways. They're just going, okay, what we've done in the past doesn't work. Let's look at something else. I say to them, I've got a blueprint that works. If you're willing to implement it, I'm willing to give it to you. I'm willing to share it. I'm willing to go into jails and talk about it to inmates. And they're really receptive to it at the moment. So, I'm really passionate about, what goes on for survivors, but I'm also passionate about prison reform too. And I just know I've got something that's working, and it works in my life. I've got a beautiful, amazing life. I do work that I really enjoy, and there's plenty of different ways. I'm watching this counterculture of these rappers coming along in the western suburbs of Sydney, and there's these kids that have had troubled backgrounds that are making money out of being rappers, and one seed of hope can grow so widely.
Yeah, I totally agree. Now, I want to touch on the Royal Commission, because there's a lot of people that may not fully understand what is happening, right? The Royal Commission started because there were complaints of child abuse happening or abuse happening within the system, right?
Yeah, for sure. Thank God that Julia Gillard, for all her, all these people try back, I think she was the most amazing woman, the Prime Minister we've ever had. She was the one who introduced it. She was challenged all the way by this current government. We got a lot of these politicians, but what it was just the covering up of abuse. The Catholic Church had George Pell created a program called the Melbourne Response, and it was showing priests how to cover abuse up and hide priests and pay survivors and off. And I think that was the catalyst of it all once that got exposed. But then it led into like the boys' homes. And, the funny thing about every state seems to have this one bad boys' home. New South Wales has got two or three. It's got Queensland's got a few. Victoria's got a few. Every state where we work these days seems to have this one or two bad, really extremely bad homes where people in authority had to know the atrocities that were happening and done nothing about it. And that makes them compliant.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they brought it in with the intentions of sort of exposing all of that, and for me, it was a chance. One thing they said from the word start, we believe you, right?
Yeah,
and that's all I needed to hear for me to feel freely to tell my story. So, and I did, and I told it, and man, I was just amazed at the support that I received from it, and the healing that I was getting from it, and then. And in prison, I encouraged other people. I was where the voice of a survivor was born, because I was encouraged. Like I was telling blokes, this is what I'm doing. This is why, my life. I'm starting to get some direction. I put away the TV and I started studying and really fit and really healthy in all of my actions. And I was glowing, and people were going, what are you doing? And I told them part of the story was I started the healing process. And if you want to start the healing process, this is the steps you take. And followed me. I was at that one jail, and 60 survivors come through in that one jail alone.
Wow.
So the Royal Commission recognised me at the time as an advocate for the Royal Commission. They said, and when I'd done my private session with them, they thanked me. They said, we're really, we've got to take our hat off to you, Russell, the work that you've done with these guys and encouraging them. So I went about creating a culture of getting men to talk about the abuse, and I eventually got moved to the New South Wales system, which I carried that culture over, and and it's been like at the moment we've got 13,500 clients nationally.
Yeah.
I'd like to think my story, me telling my story has played a big part in men and women coming forward and telling their story and beginning the healing process. Because I'll tell you what, it's when you don't know that what it is that you're suffering from is post-traumatic stress and trauma. A horrible place to be. It's like living in the jungle and not knowing your way out. It's but when you get shown through trauma counselling and at the pathway out of there, you start to and gaining stuff back. Like one of the best things that I gained back from all that was my self-worth, and that self-worth peace. Today I've got plenty of peace.
Yeah, and talking about not finding your way out of the jungle, the problem is that you're in a jungle where it's almost like you're with all of the others and you're surrounded by it all the time. You can't find an answer. You can't find a way out of it, can you?
No, because, look, living in prison is like living on Mars, and people, and it's just a different world, and you know what I mean? And you can't, look, in prison, as you know, you can't show any sort of emotion. You can't talk about how you're really feeling. And I realised how emotionally stunted I was in there.
Yeah.
And by doing the counselling and that sort of thing, I got some emotional growth out of it. And you couldn't really, it's a tough place. Like I say, in some aspects, prison's one of the most honest places there are for a couple of things. There's no keyboard warriors in there.
Yeah.
You can go around bagging people, you get a punch in the mouth. You know what I mean?
True.
That's a good thing sometimes, you know what I mean? Because it stops people from doing it. And then, as you know, people think you're surrounded by thieves. Well, you don't get stolen from in prison, but that's a no. So,
but you are in a place where everyone is in there, right? Like regardless of what they've done, regardless of what position they've had on the outside, you're in there with people that have not just, robbed banks, but murdered, like
things. And, it's funny, I remember meeting Ivan Milat. I was at Maitland with him, and I thought he was the happiest human being I've ever met in my life.
Really?
I really did. He was just, and I don't say that. I just say that was my experience with the guy. He was always happy, and I just went, wow. I don't know. He was obviously demented, but
the pretenses have been it's almost like the walls have come down, and you can only be who you are in there.
But you know what? It's amazing how quickly you normalise all that.
Yeah.
Like, it's in for a double murder, but he's a nice bloke. They're the comments you'll make.
Yeah.
But what I mean, that's crazy, and that's how, today I look at things a lot different. The more experience I get out here, the more distant I get from that life. I was talking about, I tend to gravitate to people who haven't been to jail these days. What I mean? Because I find them a lot more interesting. I like to, successful business type people or whatever, or people with a purpose or whatever. I gravitate to those type because that's what I find interesting. I don't find bank robbers interesting. I don't find drug smugglers interesting. I've heard all of them stories. They don't impress me. When I was a kid, that impressed me. And sometimes I sit back and see my growth in that aspect. Wow. That's because I don't sit back much to give myself a pat on the back, but that's one aspect of my life I will.
I like, like you said, to sit back and talk with someone like yourself who has not just broken free from the system, but is also doing something to help others break free from that system. It's such a refreshing conversation to have, because that conversation is going to be constructive. And it's going to help.
That adage, it's that old adage. I remember, I do a lot of Narcotics Anonymous meetings, and they say, if you're having a bad day, just go off and do something nice for someone else and you'll feel all right a bit after. I do that on a daily basis. So it's very rewarding what we do and the feedback we get. And I love it. I've found my calling, my purpose in life. And it's, and I'm loud. My voice is loud in this aspect. I won't have lawyers robbing people. I'm up at there's a national redress scheme at the moment that's been brought in. That's been implemented by an organisation by No More, and I'm not a fan of it. I don't believe in it. I believe in, they cap it at 150,000. It's subjective, so some public servant can make a choice to say, I'm having a bad day today. My house got broken into. You've got a criminal history. You get 30 grand and there's no appeal process. I've been really vocal about it. I get people, and I will say it, and I have lawyers saying, you can't say that. I say, yes, I can, because I'm not a lawyer. I can say whatever I want to say. I'm not dictated by your rules and regulations, and I don't believe in that stuff. I think people should, if I got, say for instance, I got awarded 80 grand for the abuse that happened to me, that wouldn't have covered the amount of money, because I've invested a lot in myself. I've come out and I do serious trauma counselling. So that wouldn't have even covered that over the period of the last 5 years, I don't think. And so I just think that, they should be fair about it. I'm not saying money's the answer to things, but I think you got to create a system where these people can get the support that they should have got. Or they should have that the abuse should have happened to them.
Like you said, it really comes down to a lack of support. With a bit of a broken system, and unfortunately, you do have a lot of people that have grown up in broken homes, in homes where they're in under difficult circumstances, and
for sure, that intergenerational. And that's, it's funny that, I see some of these claims go down, and the respondent lawyers will say, he was always going to be a crim, even if he did get abused, because his dad done jail for smoking Bible and back in possession of pot. You know what I mean? They look for these reasons to do it, and that's not always the case. I know of a case. I know this girl just down the road from where I live here, and both of her parents were really bad drink. Her dad done 32 years for bank robberies, and this girl is, I just sit back and every time I see her, I say, I'm amazed by you. You had every reason not to, to make it and be full of excuses. And I said, I'm just amazed at how successful and driven you are,
Yeah.
So that's always the case, that intergenerational stuff. It doesn't look. There's probability on it, but there's a lot of them that don't do it. A lot of them just go, shit, I don't want that.
Yeah, yeah, I know, and you can actually make a change. You don't have to be part of the system. I remember speaking with a young guy who is in prison in America, in Miami, and he's in for a murder. But while he's in there, he's actually helping others who are going through a similar situation to him. And he's doing it from the inside. And you look at that and go, like, this is a kid. And when I say a kid, he was 16. He was put in at 16 for murder, which questionable whether he did it or not. But the fact is, he's in there and he's not letting that define him. He's actually saying, well, no, I'm going to make a change while I'm from the inside. And this is where we need to be. And I think that even those who are in prison now, like, there needs to be some sort of program where it becomes life-changing rather than just, okay, well, do you want to do a uni course, or do you want to do an agricultural course? I mean, that's all well and good, but what change is that going to make to others? Yeah.
I think getting to the underlying issue, I'm designing something at the moment. It's called Rewind, and what we do is we ask a couple of questions. The questions we ask is, what's the underlying issue with your offending behaviour? Drug addiction. Okay, what's the underlying issue with a drug addiction? Trauma. That's where we start.
Yeah.
We strip it to bare metal, and that's where we start to rebuild from. We rebuild from the trauma upwards.
Yeah, and that's good.
You give them a bit of a chance. Like, I say this, and I get invited to speak at the commissioners' conferences and that for New South Wales Corrective Services. There's thousands of Russell Mansers in prison with the right opportunity. Given the right opportunity, there can be thousands like myself that can change their life around. There's thousands screaming out for that opportunity to do that. But unfortunately, the opportunity doesn't present itself. And all these, the problem we've had over the years is you've got your like your Ray Hadleys and those sort of things that jump up and down and say prisons are like motels, I'd
love to see him go to that sort of motel.
I wouldn't get, and I just said, I know where you've been going, mate, but that I haven't been I haven't been to a motel that's that poor, and and there's that always been that they stir up that sort of rage, and people go against that, because rehabilitation. If you look at the Norwegian and those sorts of systems, the model that they use ain't too palatable to the redneck Aussie.
No.
That looks soft. They look motel conditions, and they wear their own clothes, and they cook nice food and everything like that. The punishment all starts when you're isolated from your loved ones. Yeah, and choices have been taken off. The opportunity, like, I'll tell you, man, I've been doing this thing for years. I get up every morning, I'll sit in my car, I hold on to the steering wheel, and I just say this for like 10 seconds: I can go anywhere I want. Yeah, and it just tells me that I'm free, I've been doing it, and that just that freedom, and I think that's enough. Like, how much do you want to punish them? Do you want to, like, I've been shackled, I've had handcuffs on, lead cuffs on, I've been, I've had screws trying to skitch a dog onto me and put fear into me and punch me and kick me and all that sort of stuff. That taught me nothing about empathy and compassion.
No, it just made you harder.
Yeah, and it did, and it desensitised me as a coping mechanism to deal with it. And I just don't understand, and this is this approach at the moment, like we're doing with the staff training, going in and talking to new recruits, prison officers, about why would you want to go in with the intentions of traumatising other people that are already traumatised? What do you hope to achieve with that mindset? So we want to try to get away from that. We want to try to, look, you don't go in there and hug them and tell them you love them and everything like that, but you don't have to go in there with the purpose of, handcuffing them and punching them up, because that's that serves no purpose. No. It really just brings out the coward in someone to do that. Well, I remember one day I was at MWC at Silverwater, and I remember these screws coming in, this bunch of screws, and they said, put the leg cuffs on him, handcuff him behind his back, and bring the dog in. Let's make it a fair fight. And
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that attitude there is pure cowardice. It really is. That guys who just hang. I don't know how they can look in the mirror with that sort of attitude in life or anything, and I don't know how you could employ someone in that position. I think a lot's got to go down in regards to prison officers themselves. A lot of this old school. Like I used to see the ones come in and they come out of the academy with all the intentions good intentions in the world, and then they get indoctrinated, and then they go from this really decent sort of human being to this, just a grubby, fucking full of resentment. And I remember once this young bloke, he was about there for 6 weeks, and he couldn't do enough for me. Mate, I'll jump on the computer, do your case notes for him, and I'll turn up one day, and I get a top toilet roll, and on the computer with his feet up, and he said, "You'll have to come back later." I said, "I need to go to the toilet, mate." He said, "Nah, you just have to come back later." And that sort of attitude towards, treat me like weeks before, and he was really nice, wanted to treat me that, and then he got indoctrinated by these toxic human beings. So, it's going to take a lot, but it can be done, and I think,
I think it can, and it reminds me back to this guy, Aman Vestad from Norway, because you mentioned Norway. He was taken outside. I mean, this is a guy that was running guns to some of the biggest murderers across Norway. Heavily involved in drugs. He was taken outside the prison by a guard. Handcuffs taken off. The guard said, See this all around you right now, this freedom, this can be yours. All you need to do is just make the decision." And it was that one moment, that guard, by doing that one thing, that made him realize that the choice was totally his, no one else's. And so she gave that back to him.
Well, you know what? And that's all it takes. It takes someone with, like, it was funny how I used to sit back and watch sometimes how I personally responded to kindness. And I used to, I got that desensitized when someone treated me. Like, I remember a female prison officer, tapped me on the shoulder one day, and I went, like, what the? And she was being kind to me. She goes, "Hey, Russell, is there anything I can do to help you?" And I went, blow. And it just spun me out. Like, this was this person who genuinely wanted to help me, and how badly desensitized I'd become to someone helping me. And I just thought, and I snapped out of it, and I went, wow, like, because in that moment I got trapped in this, like, a period of time where, the distrust and all the bad things and everything like that had happened to me. And I'd done a podcast with Spaniard last night, and him and I were talking about that sort of stuff. We're talking about, just being treated like a piece of shit.
Yeah.
And what did it ever achieve? And it achieved nothing.
No.
And it achieved nothing. It achieved me nothing. But if someone showed me a bit of kindness, man, I'll tell you what, I would have went a long way. And it was rare in my case, but where I got my kindness from was from the people at the Royal Commission. You know what I mean? And the beauty about that is when I was given that kindness, I was sort of protected by the Royal Commission against the screws, like, because I could go, I could go and get this counselling, and for that 2 hours, the screws couldn't do anything or anything. So 2 hours, maybe once a week, I had respite from being treated like a piece of shit. And while that was happening, seeds were being planted, So while being treated with a bit of dignity and a bit of kindness, and it was just it was a real big growth time. And, I thrive on that stuff, I thrive more so today, and just being being able to help others. And these people, you talk about, I see the government federal government give like $480 million or something like that, or something to educate ICE, right? Educate ICE educate prison,
right?
The best, are dragging them blokes out of minimum security prisons and taking them to the schoolrooms and getting them to talk to them.
That's what they need. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Lived experience. Kids respond. They don't respond to bullshit. Some bloke turns up with a textbook and goes, statistics say this, and that. And kids are going, fuck off, Where you get a bloke that comes in, he's like, you know what I mean? He goes, mate, I was on it. It cost me 20 years of my life. It cost me my mental health. This is what happened. These are the decisions I made, and these are the chances I take, and this is what the price I paid. I think, you know what I mean? I've always said it. I said the greatest educators for drug and alcohol stuff, problems and that are the addicts themselves.
Yeah, yeah.
In particular, recovered addicts. But I remember when my kids, I always had this thing. I was going to take my kids up to King's Cross and show the kids prostitute themselves, and that's going to say, you know what I mean, where what happens when you pick up drugs, and that's where it can take you, you know.
Yeah. No, absolutely agree. And look, now you've got your book that's just come out, which is another thing that's going to, I think, you know, have an impact on people who are reading it, because it's, you know, if you're telling half the stories that you've mentioned on the podcast here, you know, you're going to make a lot of impact on people's lives just reading that book.
Sure. Yeah. Look, it was a long process. I remember, you know, sitting there with John Killick in Sydney at the Jet Cafe at Town Hall, and he sort of said to me, Russell, look, I've been following your story, and he said, mate, I think we should write a book. And I was a bit reluctant to do it, but, you know, the more and more I tell my story, the more and more I heal. And I think, you know, and if I can play the part in just one person not having a day of suffering, if they read that book and they go, you know what, this is, this is what I needed to hear, and you know, and it changed my life, because I'm already getting it. We're getting people ringing, like sending me messages on Facebook and Instagram and that sort of saying, man, I'm really touched by your book. I just got Danny Green, the boxer. He's a really good friend of mine, and he's just started reading. He goes, man, I'm blown away by it already, you know, I love hearing that. I love hearing that it can give someone a perspective. It can be an education, you know. Device. I had the book launch a couple of weeks ago, and I had the Commissioner of Corrective Services there. I had, you know, Gary Jubilant, who's an ex-homicide squad cop. I had a couple of professors there. I just had a wide mix, and I just love that, man. I just love that response that we're getting to it, and you know, and hearing that it's life changing for some people just to read, you know, and it gives them some sort of respite from their own trauma, and a bit of hope that there is a way out, you know. Yeah, I love it. Look, where can people get hold of your book if they want to grab a copy? Yeah, www.thevoiceofasurvivor.com, and you can order it online, and I'd love to, you know, send me a message. I'm on Instagram, Russell_Manser. You know, we got the Voice of a Survivor book on Instagram too. I'd love to hear your feedback. It really means a lot to me to get that, and you know, to hear the word when people say, you know, Russell, you're inspiring, or you know, because it really touches my heart, because you know, that's what I've aimed to do. The word inspiring means, you know, that you're life changing for someone. Yeah. You evoke an emotion in someone that's a feel good emotion, you know, and you've given them some hope, and you know, I love that. I just love it, mate. I just and to be. I remember the last time I went to court. I had 2 weeks to go, and the coppers. I'd done 4 years, had 2 weeks to go, and the coppers decided to come out with some old charges and charge me. And when I went to court on those charges, I'd been out on bail for about 18 months, and went before the judge, and I was to be. He described me as, you know, once upon a time I was a community number one. I posed a risk to the community. Now I'm a community asset. To hear those sorts of words, man, I'm an ego. I'm no different than any other man, and you know, and it felt so good. And for my kids to hear that, you know, whilst in court, really, really good. And I base my life. I've got, my motto is I give more than I take, and on a daily basis. And life is kind to me. Life is really kind to me. I've got a roof over my head. I've always got food, and you know, and I've got a lot of love in my life. I've got people who genuinely love me. I know how to feel love, and I know how to give it too, and that's my life today too. You know.
Look, I think anyone like yourself who has gone through any form of prison, you know, long, short, whatever, and to come out and turn it around and make a difference in other people's lives, I think it is an absolute commendation to you that you've actually done that. And so I really appreciate that you take the time to talk to those who are going through or going through the same sort of thing that you went through.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. I really appreciate that feedback, man. It means a lot to me, and it's just something I'll push forward. You know, like that's that education stuff I do in the prisons and that these days. You know, I can help these people. I can get them. I've got the path. I know the pathway out of that jungle, and I can show you. Look, I'll be your guide.
Yeah, yeah. That's fantastic.
It creates a safer community, and it really does, and the world's a better place.
It does. Yeah, it does. It does. Well, look, we're going to put all your links on the description of the podcast. Look, absolutely honoured to chat with you today. You are an absolute inspiration, and if you can go through what you've gone through and change it and turn it around, anyone can. For
sure. It's just all you got to do is try.
Absolutely. Russell, thanks for joining us on the Bad Boys.
I really appreciate your time, mate. I really do.
Thank you. This is the Bad Boys Podcast. Welcome back to the Bad Boys Podcast. That was Russell Manser, and what an incredible story. What an amazing guy to have gone through that.
Yeah, look, honestly, how people go through something like that and come out the other side, and one, have their shit together, and two, use whatever's left of them to help others. Honestly, it amazes me every single time. It's a beautiful story in itself, despite the trauma and the heartbreak and the pain and the suffering and all that sort of stuff. It's my hat really goes off to the guy and to anybody who's in that same situation and even survives the situation. Whether they choose to help people or not is up to them. Like, there's never any judgment from me. But just to hear the fact that he's come out the other end and he's still got his shit together and able to function.
And able to function, exactly.
I've met too many people who are just not able to function.
Yeah. And I think that's a sort of, hearing him talk about how there are so many others who aren't able to function and who aren't able to communicate to anyone about what they've been through. I also loved the conversation that we had where he was talking about finding alternatives to the age-old, let's just put him in prison. He was a victim of, or he could have been a victim of his upbringing from Mount Druitt, But in actual fact, he said it's not to do with the upbringing, it's to do with where they're put once they offend. And remember, do you remember when we were talking with, a couple of years ago, we were talking with Debbie Kilroy and she was saying the same thing. Yep.
In fact, it's remarkably and tragically common.
Yeah.
And it's not just jails, youth detention, it's boarding schools, it's, orphanages.
Yeah.
Special homes, all these sorts of things, the abuse. Like, honestly, it makes me shake my head for humanity, to be quite honest with you. I don't understand it. I don't understand what runs through a person's mind to want to inflict such sort of
it's power and authority. Power and authority.
It's the ego. It is. It's the ego gone completely and utterly fucking mad.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. So, hard-hitting interview, great guy. If you want to reach out to Voice of a Survivor, make sure you do. He also has the Prison Advocates page on Facebook as well. Check that out. 17,000 people and growing on that page. It's amazing. So we're going to be putting all the links up on the description. Make sure you check that out. And next week, hopefully, we will have Ian from Jesus Jones on the phone to have a bit of a chat with us about about what they're doing now. Obviously, touring Canada, but whatever.
Yeah, it'll be good. It'll be great to chat with him and stuff like that. And we just got to get our ducks in a row. Time zones and calendars and all that sort of stuff. It gets a bit crazy.
I reckon UK is the worst in time zones. Like trying to
I used to have a lot of clients in the UK.
Just painful. Yeah.
You end up both spending a lot of nights awake.
Now, one thing that isn't painful is our social media at the moment because, Andrew's been video editing like a demon, and he's put some pretty funny snippets up there. So
I don't know. Michelle every now and then wanders by behind me and stuff like that. She goes, "Oh God, are you laughing at your own videos again?" And I'm just going, "Oh God, this stuff, it's just, I don't know where this shit comes from out of our mouths, but sometimes it just cracks me up listening to it play back and just watching it unfold and stuff like that." So I hope all the listeners visiting Facebook, Instagram, TikTok even. I hope they all appreciate and have a good laugh themselves. And I hope they genuinely feel better about life and the world and that as a result, because that's ultimately why we do it.
If we can laugh at ourselves, then you can laugh at us too. We'll let you.
Well, you're as daft as us. You got a lot to laugh at.
Well, make sure you check us out on social media, which is Official Bad Boys Podcast on Facebook and Instagram, and on TikTok, it is the Bad Boys Podcast.
And of course, don't forget about badboysfm.com if you want some music with attitude and an all-around good time.
Press plus or follow to hear more great episodes from the Bad Boys. Or check us out on our social media at Official Bad Boys Podcast on both Facebook and Instagram.
Bad